Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 15, 2023 meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. It's 5:06. Meetings are broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable Channel 6 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices using a free app called Screen Weave and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. For program schedules, call 818-548-4013. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100, which is the number on the screen. Public comments on a specific agenda item will be taken when that agenda item is discussed. If you have any questions about matters on the agenda or requests for assistance, please contact the CDD Planning Division staff at 818-548-2140 during regular business hours. May I have roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Doom?
Here.
Commissioner Yurka?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Paul?
Here.
Chair Cognati?
Here.
All present.
The agenda for June 15th, 2023 regular meeting of the Glendale Historic Preservation Commission was posted on Monday, June 12th, 2023 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. We are making one adjustment to tonight's agenda. Item 7B, review of proposed second-story addition at 1544 Ardeven Avenue, is being postponed to a date certain, August 17, 2023.
Which means that it does not require further renoticing. So we will let all of the property owners who've corresponded with us so far know about the hearing when and if it's happening again.
Great.
And just for the record, all commissioners are present. My mic was off when I did roll call. So
Thank you. We're not going to start over, so that's good.
I'm sorry, may I ask a question of staff
You
about this
may.
item? So there's a possibility that it would not return
yes.
to us. Is there an appropriate moment, because I'm sort of interested in this contributor based on some of the correspondence I had with you. Is there an appropriate time to ask a couple questions?
Well, we can't do that tonight. We could wait and see if it comes back on the 17th of August. If it doesn't, we can maybe find time for that. I can answer quickly that we're going to address the, it looks like the DPR form wasn't updated, as I mentioned in the email, after the work that was done at this house was during the period of survey. So they looked at it before when there was a construction fence up, and then the picture they put on the DPR form came after. And we're going to amend that to kind of acknowledge that the windows were changed, that the breezeway was infilled, and we'll
And the front door was changed too.
Well, we're working, we have part of this application is to change the front door and the
Right.
gate, so we're going to shift that to make sure that that gets fixed regardless. And then, what was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, so, and then we'll drop the integrity status to moderate, but I still firmly believe it's a contributor even in that situation. Backstory, this was a messed up situation and things happened.
Thank you. Because
Things happened, a permit was issued. We could not go back after that permit was issued and finalized. And we acknowledge that it's not the way it's supposed to work, but in this case, something happened. So.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Item number 3, approval of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting minutes, thank you, from May 18, 2023. Are there any changes or alterations? Anyone?
No.
If not, can I have a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
Terrific. Roll call, please, Jay.
We don't actually need to do that. We just learned.
Terrific.
Okay.
Just a motion and second does it the trick. So.
Great. Okay, moving on. Oral communications. Do we have any oral communications this evening? Any calls?
No calls.
Great. Moving on to item 5, board or commission member comments. Mr. Morgan. You're up.
I have some comments. So the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley, at their next meeting, which is on Monday, June 19th at 7 p.m. at the La Crescenta Center for Spiritual Living, located at the corner of Dunsmore and Santa Carlotta, will be presenting Neon. Learn about the mystery and the magic behind the handmade medium of neon art and how these glowing tubes shed light on lesser-known histories. Guests will be able to explore glowing phosphor rocks and a neon salesman's suitcase after the presentation. Our speaker, Corey Siegel, is the executive director of the Museum of Neon Art, MONA. She is also an artist, curator, and educator committed to exploring the arts as an agent of growth for individuals and communities. We invite you all to come. That's Monday, again, June 19th at the La Crescenta Center for Spiritual Living at the corner of Dunsmore and Santa Carlotta. And I'm done.
Awesome.
What time is that at?
It's at 7 p.m.
7, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Any other comments from commissioners? Hearing none? Okay, moving on. Item number 6, old business. 3260 Angeles Avenue, request by property owner to extend Mills Act deadline for window replacement. Jay, want to fill us in before we open the public hearing?
Sure. This is a Glendale Register Mills Act property. It's a fantastic stone house up in North Glendale on Angeles Avenue. When the property owner brought it forward, the commission put certain conditions on it, and this was kind of one of these bifurcated ones where there were 5 conditions. 4 of them have been completed, and the deadline for completion of those was the end of 2017. So those were replacing a rear door with a new paneled door that's more appropriate to the style of the house, fixing some rough textured walls that were in the backyard with a new smoother stucco surface. There were some damaged roof tiles that were replaced, and there were some kind of funky HVAC lines coming down one of the stone walls. We couldn't get rid of those, and that didn't make sense, but the owner put kind of a cover over it, painted an appropriate color, so it just doesn't look quite as funky. The big item number was replacing all of the windows in the house, which were vinyl windows that had been installed in the existing openings. The original sills were in place. You know, in the world of vinyl window installation, this looks better than most, but it's still a vinyl window installation, not appropriate on a Glendale Register house. So the commission gave the applicant until the end of 2020 to do this. We've granted several informal extensions on that, particularly because of COVID, as the city was granting extensions on all kinds of permitting processes. In general, and I think the commission knows this from years past, we have granted informal extensions when we know the applicant is working toward resolving whatever the condition is and getting the work done. We're at the point now where after several extensions, I told Mr. Zelensky, the owner, that he would need to come before the commission just to ask for more time, hopefully with a plan prepared so that we have a sense of what timeline he's looking at, what he's asking for. And of course, it's at your discretion whether to grant this or not, to consider an alternate timeline perhaps. Staff doesn't really have a staff recommendation on this, except that we think the applicants, the owners, are working in good faith, have some circumstances that have come up that prevented them from doing this, and so we support an extension if you're inclined to do that.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Sure, yes, please. You don't have to ask my permission.
Would you please tell us which of the 4 conditions he has met?
All of the 4 that I read before the
Okay,
windows.
I thought it
Yeah.
was more a number I was looking
And
for.
then I
listening for.
actually, Casey, if you could, I have some pictures just to share with everyone, and maybe Mr. Zelensky will want to refer to those. First slide, there we go. So, front of the house.
Okay.
Oh, good, they've got it up now. And a couple of pictures there showing the 2 arched picture windows coming around this side. And you can see, because these are brown windows and brown surrounds, which are the wood surrounds with the sills, it's not as egregious as when we see the white vinyl kind of windows coming in, but it's still egregious nonetheless. And Mr. Zelensky will remind us, I believe he bought the house this way, or did you do the work? Yes, he bought the house this way. And then, was there one more? Is that it? Yeah. I didn't bring in pictures of the other work, but you can see the metal chase that was put around the HVAC lines.
I have a quick question. Are the picture windows in the front vinyl frame also?
Inserted within the wood frames.
Okay. All done, Mr. J?
I am.
Thank you. We'll open public hearing. Ken, would you like to come up and chat with us?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, my name's Ken, owner. My wife Lorraine and my daughter Zoe came.
Thanks for coming.
And your last name?
I think
For the record.
Zelensky.
There.
Yes. Thank you for being patient with us. Some things have happened financially that we're dealing with, but that aside, I have been entertaining some contractors. I had 2 out last about a week and a half ago, and so we're looking to probably do a section at a time. One particular contractor is very familiar with this board, or at least in historic homes, and said that when you take a window out, then you kind of like some of the work gets, you can see more of the work that may need to be done. It's built in 1931, so there's the original wood frames inside are original. So I estimate the vinyl windows probably 20 years, at least, maybe more. So it definitely needs to be done. I'm obligated to get it done. Want to get it done. I'll need more time. Just a time frame. It's not a particularly long time for the windows to be manufactured. Probably 4 to 6 weeks. Getting the work done might take some time too. Jay was very kind to provide several contractors. I emailed them all. I called 3. I've only had 2 come out because only 2 responded. And so, and of the 2 that came out, I think they're both very knowledgeable. They said their workload is quite high.
It's so hard right
They're
now.
backed up. So I honestly don't see it getting done this year. I do see getting at least 4 done this year.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Okay. Anybody have any specific questions?
And how many windows total need to be
I
replaced?
count about 17. We would tackle the front first. Both contractors both said the same thing, and it really wasn't my kind of thing. But the 2, when you look at the pictures, I don't know if you can go back, but the 2 right there, the 2, they're just one single pane, and they have the arch. One's bigger than the other. And so those 2, and then on the Nook side, they wanted to do the front. So it's 2 fronts and then the 2 archers. They think that would be a good way to start.
By Nook, you mean the little entry porch?
Yeah, it's right there on the left. The Nook is actually on that.
The
Yes.
breakfast nook.
Yes, that's the
what you're
one,
saying.
and there's another one just like that.
And then you'll do the French door and the side lights.
The French door, yes, we're going to do that as well. Those are windows.
Oh, it's
And
not a
then
door.
they have their original beautiful wood doored place. It's not in the
Yes.
photos, but it's
Actually,
is it?
Actually, go to the next one. Next one. Okay, so those 2 doors those are all wood. The one on the left is a Dutch door, and the one on the right is a full wood with French windows. Yeah,
Great.
that was done.
Good.
Yeah.
Anyone
That was
else?
Probably the.
Yes.
Any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, were you done, Kathy? Okay.
I have a couple of questions. So the other 4 aspects of this Mills Act besides the windows, did you undertake those, or was it the prior owner?
No, I did.
You
Our
undertook
family,
it?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ken's our original applicant for the Mills.
Yes.
Act.
Oh, okay.
These are-
So you're the original applicant.
Yes.
And the vinyl windows, you mentioned they're about 20 years old. Are they getting problematic in terms of their
Yeah,
function?
they need to be replaced, for
Okay.
sure. So this is work, and you see some of the wood, I didn't, the wood in around is definitely peeling and so forth. The wood windows would need to be painted, as well as all the framing. And one of the contractors is very familiar with doing that, and he was offering when he does the bid, he would paint the windows as well. I'm leaning more towards him, but I'm still hasn't really decided who to use for sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
What is your timeline on completion? How much time would you like?
Well, I'd like as much time as I can. The COVID really hit us hard financially. And it's 3 years, and it's affecting business even now. Deliveries are just killing us at work. So again, I start the project and actually do some 4 windows for sure this year, and maybe take it all next year as well. I think it would be a good time frame for me to not only finance it as well as have the work done. These guys, I guess, are just they're slow because they got so much work. Yeah, I guess on like my industry, what I've been doing is been affected everyone else too, and deliveries is affected everywhere. And so there's been a backlog, I guess, with everything, including these installers.
Just out of curiosity, when you say deliveries, do you mean supply chain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question. The contractors you've been talking to, have they mentioned, you've mentioned that they're slow and they'll probably take a while, and that's probably all true, but have they mentioned that they would give you a timeline in writing that they could share with us?
Yeah, I asked for quotes in writing for both. Neither would actually provide it yet. I asked that, so I don't have anything prepared, but
Not
I can
tonight, but
certainly
later.
provide that for you, sure.
Not just the quotes, but the timeline.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Generally, that would be done by staff. Hopefully tonight we'll establish a timeline, whether it's Mr. Zelensky's or the commission's, and then we'll work together after that.
But wouldn't that involve what the contractor can do? I mean, if he's working with contractors that say they can't get to this till X date, don't we have to find that out from the contractor?
Sure, but you could also, we gave Mr. Zelensky 4 years after the initial meeting. Obviously, the work hasn't begun. I'm not saying we should give another 4 years because that's a lot, but I'm not sure that end of 2024 is necessarily realistic. So, but it's not my place to establish the timeline.
I'm just curious to know what all these contractors have said they're going to take a while or whatever. Have they given you any timeline at all yet?
Yeah, they said they would, again, it would be 4 to 6 weeks to have the windows made and then scheduled in. I'm assuming that within a month, it would be able to get scheduled in about a month.
And so they would be installed within the next 6 months or so?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
At least the
pretty good.
4. And then I've found out both of the contractors use Closton, Sash, and Door. I guess they're kind of well known for wood and historic homes. So that's a good thing. I'm maybe start whatever contractor I use with them. And if I have to change contractors too, it would still be the same style wood and same style windows.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan?
So basically, we're talking the middle of next year, 2024?
I would like a little bit more time, actually, maybe to the end of the next year.
Okay, so into 2025.
Yeah.
And that would be the replacement of,
I'm thankful that you gave me this much time.
right,
But I'm realistically, I think I'll need a year and a half because it's already June, and I do see this project starting this year. And then how fast it goes is how fast I can, finance it as well as get the work done.
Right, so that's basically the front windows we're talking about, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll probably start in the front and then work my way around, to the back last, probably.
Kind of off the subject, but it's a beautiful house and a beautiful neighborhood. I love it, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for all your efforts already to get the house, to live those obligations. I know it's a lot. I know homeowners come in and they agree to these things at the time when our emotions are high and we think it's great, and we realize, wow, these things can be painstaking. And window replacements, I mean, the whole house, that's going to eat up several years of your Mills Act savings. I hope people are watching. This is the reason we offer the Mills Act savings, because a project like this is extremely expensive and extremely complicated. I'm not sure where everybody else is in terms of where they think the timeline should be. Look, he's working on starting the front of the house. And I think in my mind, if he finishes the front of the house this year, I have no problem giving him another couple of years to kind of work his way around the house. I've considered putting new windows in my house, and I can't even imagine trying to do all of them at once. That's just not practical from any standpoint. Financially, the imposition on your life, it's just not practical. So if you were even going room by room, it's probably going to take you 5 actual separate visits from these guys to get them all done. So, I mean, I don't have a problem in my mind going at least till the end of 25 to get them all done. Yeah.
I have another question for you. How many windows, we've been talking about the front windows, but how many other windows are visible from the public right away from the street besides the front windows?
Yes, so you see, you can go back to the first one. The one of the windows is not visible, but the 1, 2, and then the nook, and then the French, almost looked like French doors.
5
but
or
the French
6 windows.
Just from the
Any down the
front,
side,
1,
really?
2,
The side
3,
windows
4.
are obliquely visible.
Yeah.
There's no clear-cut visibility toward them, but you can see enough of especially the ones toward the front of the house.
Okay.
There's a driveway gate and then a small side yard on the right side that,
And you said this door on the left in the left picture, that's the driveway. That can be seen from the street, and that's already done, you said, right? That door? That's doors.
the
That's
doors
The
are
two-
both done.
Yeah, there's actually, those look like they could be the same, but they're 2 doors.
two different doors, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
both, all wood doors.
Great. Yeah, anyway, so that's where my thoughts are in terms of the timeline. Does that seem reasonable for you, end of 25?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I'll take what I can get.
Could I, before you close the hearing, you might sit down unless I need you again. We haven't discussed type of windows. So this house right now has a mixture of windows with false internal grids and windows that have no false internal grids. Obviously, the 2 picture windows at the front wouldn't have had grids back in the day. The French door look at the front of the house looks appropriate with the broken up grids. So I think it would be helpful if the commission made it clear what you would like to see, whether we should have grids all around, grids at the front. There's some precedent for more lenience on the back facade with grids, but that's not necessarily a requirement. It's usually better, and I mean precedent from the commission, not out in the world. And the owner we haven't even discussed this, but since we're putting new windows in, it would be possible to use thermal glazing with external grids, internal spacer bars, and grids on the interior face of the window, if you were inclined to go there. He hasn't asked, that's why I thought it would be best to leave this open, but I just hope to get guidance from the commission so that we have answers to those questions when they come later.
So, as I recall, this property was included in the North Glendale Stone House survey?
Just the Stonehouse survey, because there were a couple in South
But
Glendale.
is there a photos that gives any indication of what the window types
There
were?
would be just for the front, that we didn't have good detailed photos.
I did see, we saw a photo once. Yeah, there was a photo, and I don't know how it came up, but there was a photo.
Of just the front?
of the front.
And you saw grids on the
Remember
porch
the
windows?
the tree was a lot smaller, those two trees that were there.
Okay, well, we could definitely check on that. So to me, it's pretty clear that there would have been grids historically. It's just what
Probably on
was
the front,
done.
for sure.
And I think it would look better on this house. It is a cost impact. It's not huge once you're already doing this. And on wood windows, when they, it depends if they do the true divided lights or the simulated divided lights in terms of cost. And that would be part of the reason to consider the thermal glazing with the simulated divided lights, if you thought that was acceptable. Just knowing that they don't put wood grids on the outside because those would just deteriorate pretty quickly. So they would be using probably a fiberglass or an aluminum material that from the street you would never easily be able to tell the difference.
My memory is also that this house was, in that survey, found eligible for the National Register. Is that?
I didn't look it up. It's quite possible.
Do you happen to remember? I think it's partly for the architectural significance, but also the property, the developer, the builder who built it for himself. I should have looked it up. I wasn't thinking about it.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we can look that up. I think I might know where you're going with that, but if that influences your decision-making, we could put a caveat in if this, then that, when we're thinking about what to do.
Casey,
It was given a status code of 3S in the survey.
would you describe 3S for our listeners?
Identified as eligible.
There you go.
Identified as eligible for the National
The
Register.
National Register.
Yeah.
Got it.
Sorry,
Okay,
I won't get the verbiage right.
so
Yeah.
then.
Now, we have to check. Is that from the update? Do you know? Okay, good. Because we have an old Stonehouse survey, and then we did an update. The update is now old, so.
Okay, so these window discussions that we're having, true divided lights versus non-divided lights, is that a concern you have that could potentially affect its National Register status, do you think?
I would think not if it were surveyed with the vinyl windows, and I don't know whether window replacements were noted. I would, regardless, I think, be in favor of true divided light windows, at the very least where they are visible from the public right-of-way. I mean, at the front elevation.
Certainly at the front facade,
Yeah.
I would agree with
Right.
that, yeah. Is it possible that there was a mix of, what would the other option be? What looks like in some of the other pictures, Casey, if you don't mind flipping through, is that there's some, what are they, just double hungs, right? I mean, double hung single panes? Yeah, like those ones.
There's a mix. There's
True mix,
double
right?
hung, and then there's ones with like that one.
Yeah,
It's not likely that some would have had grids and some not. It's possible there would have been a mix of casement and hung. We've
but
seen
the hung
that
ones still would have
sometimes.
been
It's not always the case, but, and if they had flexibility, sometimes that works. You have to analyze that based on the window shape. So a horizontally oriented rectangular window might work better with hung than with casements, especially if it's not super wide where you could have a three-part. So we could easily work with Mr. Zelensky and the window contractor to figure out what the right fit for the different openings is.
yeah, I mean, how do you guys feel about her suggestion about, the ones that are visible from the street being maybe true divided lights versus the ones in the
Yes,
back?
and I'm not just the front, but anything that's visible from the public right away, even if it's an oblique view, it's visible.
So my question would be, go back to the front. How different? You said visible lights. What does that mean?
Divided lights.
Divided
So
lights.
Windows with grids.
Right. So the two contractors that I already talked to on the two, just plain single glass with the arch, they said it would be best not to make it
No,
any
not
kind.
that one.
Not those.
That would
We're
be
only
best.
talking about the porch windows
Porch.
and possibly some of the side windows.
Got it.
And so a true divided light would be where the wood grid, where it's a wood window with glass panes put into the wood versus the other one where it's a solid piece of glass with a grid kind of stuck onto the front of it to make it appear to be. So there's a bit of a cost differential there.
Sure.
Obviously, and then of course a materials difference. The grids on the single pane of glass won't be wood, as Jay mentioned, because that would deteriorate too quickly. So they use a different, what did you say they use? Like fiberglass?
Aluminum or fiberglass.
Yeah.
Wait, what? You don't get
On a simulated divided light wood window.
Simulated divided
Yeah,
light.
simulated.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, the
Yes, sorry,
simulated
my
one.
mistake, Chris, sorry.
Sorry. So,
I imagine they could do it, but the problem is those are just adhered with double-sided tape. It's not this integral unit, so they're usually kind of put on as a different
That's
material.
also something to
It doesn't
consider, I
mean
mean-
maybe some people do tape on the wood, but I wouldn't do that personally.
so what do you guys think that we could let?
I just have an aside to ask you, either Catherine or Michael, if do you think those windows in the something
it's
besides
just-
clear, just
divided?
pure clear windows? Were they stained? Do you think they could have been stained glass?
That's
Do you think they could have been?
Yeah.
Do you think they were? It was a single. You think it was a single glazed clear unit like that?
I think in the absence of information to suggest that it was different, that seems to me reasonable for the style.
I'm not going in a direction where you should have to do that.
Right.
I'm just asking as an aside.
Yeah.
I feel like in a lot of these earlier houses from the 20s or whenever, I'm not used to seeing just a flat, clear window like that.
Tons of
there would be, it
Spanish
would be
colonial.
leaded, it would be, I mean, this isn't Spanish at all, it's stone,
No,
of course, but,
of the era. So.
right, but of that era, I feel like I'm just curious to know if we had any documentation about anything else in there, but it sounds like we don't. That's all I'm
Well,
asking.
Mike, when you rode your bike there to visit the Collier kids,
I found a picture of me and my bike in 1960.
No,
I
we
was
have to
going
bring
to
it.
send it to,
That
no,
should be
the
on the
windows
screen.
are
Right uphill.
no, always downhill,
That's what it
always
sounds like.
downhill.
sorry, we're taking.
You got to
a
ride
minute.
home. So.
But either way, I mean, that's, I'm not implying that you should have to put something else in there besides a clear window. I was just asking, but I think aside from the front windows, I think my only other concern with this is that the windows from the public right-of-way that are visible, not just the front, but even on the oblique views, get taken care of sooner rather than later also.
Okay, yeah, maybe if you're looking at your timeline, just kind of, like you were
Absolutely.
suggesting, kind of work
Yeah,
from the
that's,
front and work
that's,
back.
that's
Yeah.
the plan.
Okay, and I don't know, I mean, I think we can trust staff to work with him on the grids versus the things and the this and the that, and the divided light, real divided lights versus not. I mean, I think.
Well, I think we've.
We have,
Yeah,
like,
just with the guidance that there'll be true divided light.
Where they can
Where
be
they're
seen.
visible from
Yeah,
the public right away. Yeah,
And
I
then
think.
on the back of the house, if they want to, you might look into this not true divided light thing with their sticking stuff on the glass and think this is not something that's going to last a long time. You may decide to go with wood.
No, you can always back away to the
Yeah,
single.
you can always, yeah.
Yeah.
The other, you've been mentioning 4 windows.
Yeah.
Technically, if you look at those French doors, there are 3 separate sash.
Yeah, those
So-
were not, it was actually the front 2 and then in the nook, the 2 on the sides.
Then
Apparently
we
it's
need
not
to- we
doors,
need to
he said.
clarify- Yeah, but
Yeah,
let's
that's-
just clarify, if those aren't doors, are we calling those 1 window or 2, the 3-part?
There are actually technically 3.
3 windows.
One big one in the middle. I think that the both 2 side panels at one time cranked out.
They probably did.
They probably did.
What I'm ultimately asking is,
right.
you said you were going to do the 4 front windows, and I just want to make sure that one of those is this 3-part window.
I'll make sure that
Yeah,
happens.
just a
Yeah.
technicality.
You got it.
So,
Yeah, and it's just it is the front of the house.
yeah.
Okay. All right, so do we need to pass a motion? What are we doing?
Yeah, since you're extending the timeline, tell us what date do you want? I'll read back the conditions.
The
I
end of
think we know what they
25?
are, so.
Can I say something? Would that be okay?
go ahead.
I just wanted, I remember when this house went on the market, and I realized that it had been found eligible for the National Register, and that there had been vinyl window replacements at some point, and I just went ballistic. And I was so upset because it's these stone houses are just so special in Glendale, and this is really a magnificent example. And I was just so happy when you bought it, and I think I showed up at your door to talk with you. This was before I was on the commission.
Girl, I'm really careful now.
And this is before I was on the commission, when I was just the
Fangirl.
fangirl and the bee in everyone's bonnet about historic preservation. And you were so responsive and receptive, and you've clearly been, showing great good faith in your treatment of this house. The COVID story just makes complete sense to me, and I'm so happy that you guys ended up with this house. So we've talked about what we'd like to see for the windows. I think by the end of 2025, I think is reasonable. As you said, Chris, like the Mills Act is not a moneymaker on this property for, because of that window replacement. I mean, that's just a lot of money up front. I think it is, if we want to say those initial 4 or 5 windows by the end of this year, I think that would be reasonable. And if for whatever reason, because we live in uncertain times, if that ends up not being possible because of supply chain issues or whatever, I would be comfortable with the owners working with staff for one of those informal extensions. But I just completely support extending the Mills Act for the windows.
That sounds like a motion.
Yes.
But motion plus
There's
speech.
agreement on the front facade, putting a timeline on that? So,
Yeah, the end of this year, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
If I may say.
You may.
6 months goes by in the blink of an eye
it
at
does.
this point in life. So if we're giving 3 years, would it make sense to give a year and then
Sure.
the rest of
It's
the
2.5
time?
years,
Right.
but yeah.
Since it's June, so.
Yes.
Actually, and we're not giving 3 years, we're giving 2.5 years, so.
Okay, sounds reasonable.
And that's for the front facade and
1 year
there's
for the front facade, and then the
and there
end of 2025
and
for the
then
rest.
so all the windows on the front facade, everything that's visible from the public right of way.
No,
not the
front-
driveway side,
The
for
4
instance.
front window openings by June 30th, 2024, the remainder by December 31st, 2025, and then we'll work out which are true divided lights, which are simulated, if any, and
Okay.
and we have your direction on that.
Great, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who made the motion? Okay. I like that.
Roll call,
Okay,
please.
and I'm sorry, Mike, you made the
I
second?
need to second.
Okay, I'm not paying
I
attention
would like
tonight.
to officially close the public hearing. Okay.
Oh, good idea, yeah. Okay, Commissioner Doom,
Yes.
Commissioner Yurka,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Paul,
Yes.
and Chair Cognati,
Yes.
5-0 to approve the extension with some conditions.
Thank you for coming in tonight, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Good luck with the
thanks.
project.
Good luck.
Okay, moving on. New business. 926 Hillcroft Road, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application. Is this you, Casey?
That's me.
Take it away.
I always get to do the fun nominations.
Yes, you do.
Make Jay do the hard stuff. Good evening, commissioners. This is the Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application. It's on. Am I just not close enough?
Here we go.
Okay. For 926 Hillcroft Road. The property is in the northeast portion of the city in the Ross Moyne neighborhood. It's not in the Ross Moyne Historic District. It is on Hillcroft Road, which is a short curvilinear street in the hillside neighborhood west of Verdugo Road. A quick introduction to the house itself. It is a 2-story Spanish colonial revival style house constructed in 1929 and has textured and smooth stucco with a low-pitched hipped and gabled roof with red clay tiles. Because of the slope of the lot, it reads as 1 story from the street, but does rise to 2 stories at the rear. And it was designed by noted architect Arlo R. Sedgley, who worked in Southern California on a variety of types and styles, and spent his last years living and working in Japan. The house has a U-shaped footprint with a projecting wing to the east and an attached garage to the west that creates this uncovered central courtyard at the front. There is an entrance arcade, a small one that runs parallel to the street at the rear. And the wood panel door with central grille is set in this deep canted surround. There's a concrete staircase that leads down the east facade, allowing access to the rear. The side facade has multiple wood casement windows with leaded diamond pattern, as well as a 2nd-story balcony with wrought iron railing and decorative wood beams below. And then there is this secondary entrance with this non-original concrete and metal staircase. As noted, the rear of the building does rise to 2 stories. The east side projects to the south, and the upper story cantilevers slightly with this scalloped detail. A 2-story patio and balcony addition with a curved staircase was added to the west side of this facade in recent years. The addition did remove original balcony, replaced a picture window, and then created some awkward massing by covering up some windows and such on the first story. And then the facade does include some multi-light casement windows as well as some non-original vinyl sliders. The property has seen some alterations over the years, as I've mentioned and noted in the staff report. These include the replacement of the original garage door, the cladding of the arcade column, or the arcade column was clad in this brick veneer, and then the flooring of the arcade was reclad in this like small stone tiling. Some windows have been replaced with inappropriate vinyl sliders, and then that really large patio and balcony addition was added at the rear. The major alterations, like the majority of the windows and this really large addition, are centralized to the rear of the building, and the front alterations are less impactful and don't really impact the overall setting, feeling, and association of it as a 1929 single-family residence. The property does not appear to be a distinctive example of the Spanish Colonial Revival style, and we are not recommending it for designation under Criterion 3. However, the property is associated with significant Arthur W.R. Burnett, who lived there from 1931 to 1946. Him in his later years here on the left, but the one on the right is kind of fun. 1935, this is him in Glendale. I couldn't figure out where in Glendale, but that is him with his wife and his greyhound Warcry, which I thought was a really fun name. If you zoom in, his collar says War.
Oh, goodness. Oh, yeah.
Cry on the part you can't see.
Maybe. So 2 years after the house was constructed, the author did purchase the house with his first wife, Marjorie, after they had just moved west from Chicago. The publication of Mr. Burnett's novel, Little Caesar, in 1929 hurled him into mainstream success, and the screen rights to the book were purchased by Warner Brothers shortly after, which precipitated their move out here. W.R. Burnett is significant in the history of novels and film for his portrayals of the anti-hero protagonist, an archetype he is credited with creating and introducing in his gangster novels. Burnett's famous novels, such as High Sierra, Little Caesar, and The Asphalt Jungle, showcased a likable villain. You have jewel thieves in High Sierra and The Asphalt Jungle, and the gangster Caesar Rico Bandello in Little Caesar. His technique for telling the story through the bad guy's point of view created a human element that allowed these characters to become actual characters that the reader cared about instead of just a plot point that happened to the good guy. Burnett also went on to write for numerous films, writing screenplays for many of his own adaptations. The 1931 adaptation of Little Caesar made Edward G. Robinson a star, and it was listed in the National Film Registry in 2000. His gift for dialogue writing was showcased in a 1932 Scarface film, and High Sierra in 1941 put a mostly then unknown Humphrey Bogart on the map. He co-wrote the screenplay for the 1942 film Wake Island and was nominated for an Academy Award. And during the years Mr. Burnett lived at Hillcroft Road, he authored some of his most significant novels and screenplays, a total of approximately 18 novels and screenplays written while he was in residence. With that, staff does find the property eligible for listing in the Glendale Register under Criterion 2 for its association with W.R. Burnett and suggests the name W.R. Burnett House. Staff also recommends the conditions listed here to be included as part of the Mills Act contract. I'm happy to answer any questions on the property. I did read Little Caesar in preparation for our presentation, so if anyone would like a recap, happy to share my thoughts.
The last line in Cagney's voice.
Gosh, I didn't watch the film. I read the book. I don't know that.
Assume the last
Don't
line's
ask me
the
for
same.
quotes, but that's it. Thank you.
Test our commissioners.
Thank you, Casey. Does anyone have any questions for Casey on her presentation? Okay.
I'm trying to put it into a question.
I'm sorry?
I'm trying to put it into a question. I'm thinking about it.
Okay, well, you keep thinking.
Hopefully someone-
I'm going to open the public hearing and invite our one speaker card, Neil, to come on forward, our property owner. How you doing, Neil?
Good evening.
If you don't
Thank
mind
you.
just stating your name again for
Oh,
us.
yes, I'm Neil Collier, the owner with my wife of 926 Hillcroft Road in Glendale.
Welcome.
We are longtime Glendale residents, have been here about 23 years now, so
Excellent.
in this house for the last 3 years. I don't know if you what I can say to expand on that, other than to let you know that when we purchased the house, I think I've explained this to many of you who visited, we were not aware of W.R. Burnett's provenance in the house or residency in the house. We were informed of that from the previous owner, who had actually done some legwork on his own. I'm not sure how he came to be aware of that. I think he may have just been interested in who the previous residents were, and he discovered that. And then when he sold us the house, he informed me of it. And I've had some experience with Mills Act applications. I have a property in an HPOZ in the Carthay district of Los Angeles. It's a duplex, so which I helped spearhead the original HPOZ effort for that. And I didn't see it through, but I initiated it, and then other people took over the work. So I am very passionate about preserving historic properties. It's what I do for a living to some extent, and also I have done a lot of work to kind of preserve properties. So I'm fully willing to do whatever is necessary, especially what they've proposed in the packet. But from the standpoint of the author, I think it's a very exciting addition. I think would be a very exciting addition to Glendale to have somebody with this pedigree, and somebody who probably hasn't received the kind of notoriety that he should have, considering, you know, the legacy of his work. And so ultimately, you know, I don't think he's gotten what he deserves, and so this would be a great, you know, testament to kind of that breadth of work, as you see.
Yeah.
So anyways, I don't know if I could answer any questions or anything
That's
like
great.
that.
If you don't mind just staying there for just a moment.
Sure, absolutely.
Does anyone have any questions specifically for our homeowner? We can always bring them up later, but if anybody has any questions now.
Sure, may I ask a question?
Sure.
It's perfectly legitimate under criterion 2 now without any changes. Are you willing to pay for all the recommended changes there for the Mills Act?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, we had already, I don't know if you want to put up the slides that show the front arcade area in particular. When we bought the house, I mean, I have an eye for modification, but I think this is pretty obvious, you know, that the brick columns should not have been there. I think it should have, you know, never been installed. I knew that the previous owners to us had actually installed that pebble green entry. Unfortunately, there was some magnesite that spilled out from the entryway, which we restored after we moved in. But I don't know what it looked like coming out. They just said it looked the same, so, but they decided to demo it, and they installed that instead. They've made some questionable decisions that we've had to fix. For example, there were some vinyl windows previously that were installed. We did replace those with the like kind, you know, French windows with the exact same kind of number of lights that I kind of used cues from other windows that were in the house, but we haven't gotten around to doing all the windows. There are still a couple in our den on the second level down. There are some in the kitchen as well. We've also done the magnesite repair. I think I told you about that. Was extremely difficult to do and took forever, but I think it looks great. I don't know if some of you have seen it. I think Jay and Casey. And we found old electrical that was plastered over, and we installed new antique, or not new, but antique sconces of the period. Cool. So we've done our best to try to, you know, maintain. We've repaired the fireplaces that both were not operable in their current condition. So we're very committed to the house, and we definitely want to continue. But it is obviously a big, you know, order. I mean, even I think she showed you the concrete staircase leading down the side. I'd like to, you know, get that repaired. It doesn't look that great, you know. So there's a number of things, but ultimately, I think it's a reasonable request that you guys have proposed for the repairs that are needed.
Daniel.
I'm just curious. So when you did you have your eye on the house already, and then you found out W.R. Burnett lived there, or was that why you?
I didn't even find out. We were in escrow. It's a long story. We were in escrow, then we got out of escrow, and then we got back in, and that like never happened. So I think you would know this. Like once you cancel, you're never coming back. But so it was It was meant to be. So
Yeah.
we got back in escrow. We hadn't actually had contact with the sellers. The previous owner was, I wouldn't say he's a super well-known musician, but he's a well-known, like in a certain sphere. But a very nice family. And he informed me of this when I met him almost right towards the end, because we leased back the house to him for 3 months while he was trying to find a temporary residence. So it was like 5 months in, and then that's when he kind of said, hey, by the way, here's, we'd done some research, I don't know if you're aware, and I hadn't bothered even looking into it. So yeah, it was a surprise to me. And I thought, well, this would be something great to do, but with COVID and everything, like we occupy the place days before COVID hit. So by then, everything was off the table. There was a lot of uncertainty. So we just I tabled it for a while. But now that things are kind of.
It's interesting. So
normalizing.
you had an attraction toward the house. You were interested in the house.
Yeah. Oh, I love the house.
What made it eligible was the fact that this author lived here, but you didn't know that when you were interested in the house.
Yeah. I mean,
that's fascinating. It's
I
an interesting.
love old Spanish style houses and buildings just as a whole.
And I really think it's wonderful that you have experience with historic preservation from what you mentioned.
I love the old tile. I love, the flooring, the stucco treatment, the plaster work, the beams. I mean, I could go on and on about all the architectural details. So over time, I definitely am committed to, restoring as much as I can. Unfortunately, there are some things I don't have any cues about. The original kitchens is gone. It was gone well before even the previous seller. And so I have no idea when that was done. But we've done our best to try to, preserve everything that we can. But a lot of it had already been, especially on the inside. But, as much as we could on the inside and on the outside, we'll absolutely, nothing is going to change other than what's necessary to kind of restore the original look.
Great.
Yeah.
Michael?
I have a question. So when we were out there, if you could put up the garage door. So you had mentioned the garage door was like airtight or?
It's a insulated garage door, so it's not exposed on the back side of it. It's got a panel that's not similar to the front, but it's completely paneled, and there's insulation inside the panels, the 3 panels below the lights. So that was installed, again, it's definitely a very older, it's an older garage door. It is a multi-panel, so it rolls up. My preference would be to keep it paneled, but if we could find a happy medium in terms of the look, I don't mind replacing. It's just, these days it's hard to find, something that is going to match exactly. Like we have a neighbor next door to us and they have the original garage door, and that definitely just kind of opens out,
That's one of the best doors in the city, by the way.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's clear, like I haven't seen a garage door like that anywhere, but they have it. And their house is great, but I don't know that it's realistic that we could even find a garage door like that. But again, I'm open to ideas and, certainly willing to consider anything that's necessary.
Thank you. Anything else, Michael?
Well, just that some of the things we're doing for the Mills Act really don't have, they have to do with the house itself, but really and truthfully, we're nominating it because of W.R. Burnett. So it's, where does, criteria 2 stop in basically all of this other stuff that has to be done, like the backside where you have the
Balcony.
the twin, whatever it is in the back.
Balcony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On
Well,
it. So,
it's always-
and the plaster in the front is entirely different than the plaster in the back.
Yeah.
So,
Why don't we hold this discussion for when we deliberate a little bit more? How about that?
Okay.
And that we'll just, while we still have the public hearing open. Kathy, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
thanks.
We're going to close public hearing, ask you to sit down. We may call you back
thank
up
you.
in a few minutes, but let's deliberate. Kathy, you want to start?
I actually want to ask a question of
You may do
Casey,
so,
if I
please.
could. I don't know if you have a photo of the whole front elevation, but can you point out what is original to it? Like what remains? The garage door's been changed, there's,
Here we are.
So the majority of it is original. The garage door has been changed. We don't know what the original looked like, but obviously not. And then the wrought iron gate, I assume, was added at some point. That brick cladding on the column in the arcade was added. And then the nomination did state in the courtyard that there was a central fountain in this courtyard. We didn't find any evidence for that to be true. We had the original assessor's info as well, and that it was removed. So whether or not that was redone, taken out at some point, we don't know.
There are also a couple of built-in benches along the sides of the courtyard wall. Those looked, we're just guessing sometimes, those looked right. They felt okay. So we were supposing they were original.
And would make sense if there was a water feature there to make this a seating area. But really kind of the bones of this courtyard is generally original.
And I don't know much about historic paving. I do know that what's in front of the door is not
That
original.
stone is not original.
Is concrete and brick, was that?
We don't believe that's original. It was probably done when they put the brick on the columns, all kind of at the same time, because there's also brick in the driveway. It mirrors that. So most likely this whole kind of front hardscape was redone. There's no landscaping here. At some point, it was just done cohesively, and all the original was taken out.
Yeah, the brick and concrete always seems very 70s to me.
Yeah.
And
Or
onward.
80s.
But likely, like most of our period houses, probably concrete. What pattern, we don't know, but.
Thank you.
Okay, what do we, Mr. Morgan, you had further thoughts?
Well, just going down the list, on the things that they want done, as far as how detailed are we going to get? Because we're really nominating the house for criteria 2 rather than for its architectural style.
I think that weren't the guidelines recently kind of updated to state such and such and such and such a thing,
Well-
and significantly intact, or however that's
Well, it is significantly intact.
Yeah.
But
I think one way the commission can approach this is to think about the aspects of integrity, the 7 aspects, apply differently to different properties, particularly properties that may have associations rather than architectural value. So if we start thinking about the period when Burnett lived there and the changes that are clearly post-Burnett era versus what feels right to that era, even if it's not historically 100% accurate because we don't know. So that's the guidance that we would offer, is to allow changes that would work for a typical Spanish colonial house of the 20s and 30s, meaning get rid of aluminum windows, put in wood or possibly even fiberglass windows that recall that appearance with divided lights, and that's where we might allow simulated divided lights rather than true. The courtyard seems pretty obvious, to get rid of the brick, to probably put in some concrete paving. Putting a fountain there may be remnants of something that was there. I don't think that's historically resonant one way or the other. So I think that there's definitely more latitude when we have something like this, but it's not like we just have to accept all of the changes and say, well, it's only Burnett. We can kind of try to bring it back to the Burnett period generically, if not accurately.
Because I also feel like there are 2 questions. One is its eligibility for the register and what sort of integrity we expect for a property that's eligible for its association. And as a film professor, I can tell you how important W.S. Burnett is. I just taught a course in the 1930s, classical Hollywood, and I do Public Enemy, not Little Caesar, but he is really foundational. So there's no question in my mind that this house is significant, and significant for its association. The separate question is the Mills Act question. And because it is, a public subsidy for maintenance and rehabilitation and preservation. And so, I think we don't want to conflate those things. And the question is what degree of preservation and rehabilitation we expect. for a property that we recommend giving a Mills Act contract to.
That's an important distinction. Thank you for reminding us.
And the threshold of integrity, I mean, I've done a fair amount of National Register nominations, and I've found things eligible under criterion A for broad patterns or events, or criterion B for individuals. There's a bulletin that talks about that threshold of integrity if we apply that, and it's pretty simple that a historical contemporary just needs to be able to recognize the property. So if Burnett came here today, would he recognize it as his old house? He probably would, you know, and say like, what are these changes? I'm not saying that nothing should be changed back, but that threshold of integrity, at least at the federal level, if we use that as any sort of template, is just that a historical contemporary needs to be able to recognize the property, period.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts? Casey, can you put the list back up? Conditions? Thank you. Did anyone see anything? I mean, I hate to open a can of worms, but did anybody see anything else that struck them as significant that they would maybe want it?
I do have one concern. So I am troubled about the addition in the rear because it is, I mean, I do think it's a lovely house. I do think it is very awkwardly attached. And there was clearly a loss of character defining features through the addition. And it's lost, you know, original proportions, massing. And I think if Burnett were to go to the rear of the house, like he would not recognize it. But that's.
But he'd say, "What a view!"
Oh, parties I could have.
But I'm of mixed minds about that because I do understand that the front elevation is more important. My one other concern is how little of the front elevation is visible. And really, what is visible is a non-original garage door that even if it is replaced with something more appropriate, will still be a non-original garage door. And I swear this has nothing to do with my recent issue regarding fence variances, but that. And I'm guessing that there is not a permit for the fence. It would not have been added before the fence ordinance went into effect in 1923. And I would want as a condition removal of the fence and the hedges, possibly replacement with something smaller. But I do think if we are publicly subsidizing this really exciting property, that the public needs to be able to see it.
I agree with you on that. That's a good point. And I was thinking about that a little bit too as you were talking about that. And may we please look at the image of the front of the house with the fence and the hedge?
Yeah. No, the other way.
Where did it go? Where did it go? Okay. Yeah. I would agree with you on that point too. Since this house is associated with a significant person, and it's someone very important, to make it more visible. Otherwise, it really, all you see when you're driving by really from your car, otherwise is just the garage door, as you mentioned. And
Just as a matter of consistency, or not precedence, but consistency, we do have several Mills Act properties that are completely invisible, more so than this one. So just keeping that in mind. Some of those are architecturally significant. One that I can think of has an association with a person and an architect and an artist and has great architecture.
And I hear where you're coming from on that. And there have been, and there will be other homes brought before us that just by the nature of even how they were originally built are not going to be visible from the street. I get that. But I'm with the other two commissioners in that it is very frustrating, and we've all kind of said this before, I think. hedge goes up in front of a Mills Act house, you're like, well, wait a minute, that's not, we get that we can't regulate that, but really, that's not what we did this for. So in a situation where it could become, where it is really technically visible, not because of any topographical situation, which we have faced with some, it does seem appropriate that the public should be able to appreciate it in a way. So I get where you're coming from. And, look, I mean, I know council is allowed to put additional conditions on things when they vote, right, Jay?
Yes. Or perhaps
How often
strike
does that
them.
happen?
It's pretty rare.
Yeah, because I could see this going before the council. There was a precedent for this where one council person in particular wasn't comfortable grandfathering in, for lack of a better word, an unpermitted wall in front of a house that we had nominated for the register and for a Mills Act contract. So it would be interesting to see if that council person remembers that and still feels the same way.
No doubt.
Or if he would be, or she, sorry, would be inclined to add an additional condition. I mean, I could see it going so many different ways.
No, we're already predicting council on a different property than you're talking about. A property was nominated for significant association with someone no one had really ever heard of. They made an interesting case that despite not knowing this person, they were interesting. We recommended approval, HPC recommended approval, we brought it to council. There were alterations on that house, and they were like, what are we doing here? And that wasn't just one. I think that was maybe not a full consensus, but these are complicated. These are harder nominations because they're not as pretty necessarily, so not.
Do we have any sense of when that fence went up? Are we assuming that's a 70s fence with the brickwork, or do we have any sense of that?
No, we don't.
We don't.
No,
Okay.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, we'd also have to check. A lot of hillside houses have variances for setbacks in general. It's possible they could have a fence setback, less likely than just a front setback variance.
I also think that given the question that you were asking, Chris, and reminding us about the wall, I also do feel like it's more likely that council would approve without that barrier.
That if it was, they would be more likely to do it if it were off the.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably true. Because to my question to Jay was, will they come up with that condition or will they just deny it altogether? And chances are he would just deny it. Now, in the case of the house with the wall, removing the wall was pretty darn impractical. Removing a fence is, looking at it, obviously easier, but would that council person even bother making that condition, or would they just outright deny it?
And it's what you were saying about us not being able to regulate the hedge. I think that's something that, because I share your frustration with Mills Act properties and register properties in general, but it's something that we can't regulate after the fact. All we do is make a recommendation to council. I think that actually can be a recommendation that we make, especially, because of the whole point is educational, right? Is to, not the whole point, but it's to celebrate Glendale's history, and it's to let the public know what resources we have. And I think that, that a certain level of visibility, I think, is within our purview to suggest. That's.
Yeah, no, it makes perfectly logical sense. But Jay, you've always kind of told us that we can't. We can make recommendations and considerations.
With hedges, we can't. But I personally, I think many of my colleagues, I won't speak for Casey, but she may join. I can't stand tall hedges in front of Mills Act properties, Glendale Register properties, and even Historic District properties. I don't think we should be allowing that. We don't have the ability to regulate that. Only council through an ordinance change could do that. Each of you has a voice to council person. If that became an issue and they were interested in raising it, they would certainly have staff support for the historic properties.
And they even can't do it. They couldn't do it, what you're saying, on an individual level at the time of granting the Mills Act. They couldn't say, and by the way, as council, we are making this condition on this specific property.
They could put whatever condition on this property that
I
they
mean,
want.
this one specifically, but
Yeah, it
any
wouldn't-
property that comes before them, they're not able to do that. It would have to be an ordinance change. It couldn't just be a condition on the Mills
To
Act.
extend beyond a Mills Act contract to any other property, it's an
Okay,
ordinance
So they could make
change.
it a condition on a Mills Act.
We,
definitely.
and we
And
can
we can-
suggest it.
Yeah,
We can
you
suggest
can
it.
recommend it, they could go with that.
Well, I'm thinking one really simple way to frame this, I mean, maybe it would take a little more homework, but to just get a couple of images of the fence somehow, and it would probably be pretty easy to figure out if it's a fence from within the last 50 years or not, if you look at the wrought iron in detail, and if it's not a character defining feature that was probably not there when Burnett lived there, then get rid of the fence. Especially if there's no evidence that there was another, I mean, if you look closely and there's like the remains of poles or something else, maybe that's a different story. But maybe there just needs to be a little homework done on, is there any archaeology related to a former fence there? Is that brickwork at the bottom beneath the fence the same sort of 70s era brickwork elsewhere? So I think if there could just be a little more homework done, we could probably get to the bottom of the fence thing really quickly. And if it wasn't there when Burnett was there, take it out with the Mills Act money.
I think we can say it wasn't there when Burnett was there,
Okay.
but we will be doing that kind of work, definitely,
Okay.
before we go to council, so.
Casey, is the gate connected to the garage also connected to the fence?
So yeah, the side of the gate runs from the garage across and then parallel to the front.
So the gate would come off as well?
Correct, because there would be nothing to,
Nothing,
it'd be just a gate hanging out,
just be all open?
secure.
I would like to invite you back up and open the public hearing, Neil. I think I was the first one to meet with you.
Yes,
And we
yes.
had briefly talked about the fence, and you had, I think, indicated that you really wanted to keep the fence. I think you did, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, which is why I'm inviting you up. How do you feel about the removal of the fence?
It's funny, it's like the one thing my wife and I were talking about. You know, it's tough. On one hand, I totally understand where you're coming from, and I would prefer there to be full exposure. It's kind of a domino thing, though, because even if we don't have the fence, then it gets into the equation of like, what is going on in front? You know, it starts dominoing into like, what's going on with the landscaping? Does that even kind of work anymore? You know, and not that it's great by any stretch, you know, but I just worry. And then the other thing, the other concern my wife has is, you know, just we have coyotes running rampant in the neighborhood, and she hears them howling at night, and she is a little bit of a nervous wreck. So just trying to consider that. But it's a tough call. I mean, if we did it, then, you know, if that's a condition, I guess it is what it is.
I do want to note that if the commission does make that a condition, and that is something you are not comfortable moving forward with, you do not have to move forward with the Mills Act.
Yeah.
You
I
can
mean,
decide what's more important,
Or see what council says.
or see what
kind
council
of-
says.
yeah, I mean, I would, you know, personally, I don't like it. Honestly, it's not.
As a
you know,
preservationist, right?
I mean, I don't personally like it. I don't like the gate. I like being able to see, you know, it does cut off the house for sure. There's no doubt about that. And when you have the garage, I can see your point. So it does kind of beg the question of like, what's going on here? So it's a tough call for me. I know my wife would prefer to have it on there, just for safety, for, you know, whatever. I don't feel unsafe, but, you know, she does. But if it's necessary, then I'm not unsupportive of that notion either. So I don't know really how to
Yeah,
proceed.
and I have to be honest, your position either way isn't necessarily going to
Yeah.
sway us.
I'm just saying kind
Engage
of
with you
like,
about it.
but I understand and I respect, you know, whatever decision you guys have.
And you're
you know.
pretty comfortable getting rid of the hedge? if
Well,
you-
yeah, I mean, there's no
Yeah.
point in having
Okay.
a hedge if you're not gonna have
Okay.
a fence. I mean, the hedge was really to cover the fence. It was
Yeah.
not, we didn't have anything to do with that. It was just how we bought the house.
yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't keep the hedge up if there's no fence.
And just to throw out an idea, last month, the commission did look at ironwork gate in a arcade setting, to consider whether that would be a possible
You're
compromise
saying putting it
alternative.
inside the,
Yeah.
yeah.
That would look funny on a two-arch.
I would never do
unless
that.
it would-
I can just tell you
I was
that.
picturing it being a low
Yeah,
gate,
yeah, yeah.
so-
I mean, it's either there or it's not.
Well,
So,
I'm having another thought about this, though, because if you get rid of the hedge, I mean, I could see the house, that fence, I mean, that maybe that fence is incompatible with the era, and there could be another fence put in there with the Mills Act money that's more of, from the period of significance, if that's an early 80s fence. But honestly, if that hedge wasn't there, I mean, even now, I'm wondering if the house would be much more visible without the hedge, with just the wrought iron fence.
It would be. I did look at it a bit, and my sense was vaguely Spanish style, but not particularly compatible. And if that were to be replaced, there would need to be a variance.
Which they
It
would
just
probably
gets-
not get.
Yeah, it just gets complicated. I think, I mean, given that we're dealing with integrity, pretty substantial integrity issues through no fault of the,
Yeah, I totally
of the
understand.
applicants, I think, I mean, I thought you raised a good point. Chances are really good that there was no fence there. I mean, Glendale had famously it has this 100-year-old fence ordinance. And I think that restoring the front, the best we can do with this property, it's got two major elevations, one at the rear, which is severely compromised by previous work, and this one, and I think the best that we can do with it is to restore
Okay.
the front as much as possible. That would be my...
And there's certainly a period of significance with the nomination, and since it's a landmark, you kind of got to do what you can to bring it back to that. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Yeah,
I'm going to
welcome.
close the public hearing again.
Thank
you. Okay, so Casey, thank you, dear.
The right way.
Thank you. So it sounds like we're looking at a possible fifth recommended condition. Is that right? Near recladded stucco, replace vinyl windows. Oh, I had a question about number 3, the garage door, Jay. Your recommendation is wood.
That's based on longstanding commission precedent.
You're killing me with this one. We approved, and I got pushback about a non-wood door on a house we recommended for designation with a Mills Act contract that had a metal wood-like door that I felt was very inappropriate. Somehow I was the only one. So I feel like, well, if that's going to be our position, then does it have to be a wood door? Does it make a difference that this
No,
one's 3 feet from the street where the other one was 20 feet from the street?
When I say precedent, no decision sets precedent for
understand.
all subsequent case-by-case decision-making, but that one's one that's been around. We've done that many times over the years. I don't quite remember the one you're talking about.
On Grandview.
Consistency is overrated,
Never gonna forget
you
it.
know?
I remember.
It's the one with the house that had the tile around the...
Yeah.
I remember, if I apologize,
Maybe.
I don't even remember where I stood on that.
Everyone was like, no, I don't care. I'm like, "Wait, what? Anyway.
No, and you raise,
I care.
yeah, you raise a good point. I mean, I think that there's a kind of
It is a lot, this one is a lot
a
closer to the street.
notable, and also it's, that one, just because it was farther back because it was brown.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I mean, the purist in me is thinking, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
But this one, because of it just looks so,
Yes.
so, it stands out as,
And you say simple design, you mean not the roll-up kind, is that what you mean?
No,
by simple
roll-up's fine. It would be a panel design like the applicant is asking for. It could be simple vertical tongue and groove type design. Could be horizontal tongue and groove. Vertical looks nice on Spanish. Could have a little bit of border detailing, but just keeping it pretty simple overall.
Okay, well, I'm not going to push
It
back.
could have lights across the top. That seems like everyone wants that these days, but there's precedent for that in old garage doors going back to Craftsman era.
is there
But
precedent?
it wouldn't look like what's there now, so.
Was that common on Spanish?
I've seen it, so it's, I don't think it's as common. You see it on Craftsman more. I've seen it on Tudor. So, and, you know, period revival, there was a lot of fluidity between the styles, so.
And then the, regarding number 4, it's just the black stones. We're not talking about the brick ribbons, and we're not getting into any of that. We're
You
leaving the
could
brick
add
ribbons
that
alone.
if you wanted to make it a consistent flow, but we didn't call that out.
My feeling on that, even though I was speaking on behalf of restoring the front as much as possible, I don't, just for environmental reasons, I just prefer not to throw concrete and then reconcrete it. Whereas I think the stone has to go.
Maybe even that stone little section in the middle, maybe, of the main
Oh,
pad,
I
where the
hadn't-
fountain, alleged fountain
The
was.
alleged fountain, the spectral fountain.
Yes.
I actually realized it does run below the brick. Oh my God.
We really are not ready for Rockhaven. Casey, I know you're really anxious to get there.
Okay,
but we
so
are
I'm gonna
not
say
ready.
I go the wrong way, and then I click the other side, and it still goes that way. So it's not me; it's this computer. But you can see it actually runs along the bottom of these benches too.
No, I think that's tile.
Are you?
Yeah, it's like a little
it's
pretty
tile.
Spanish
Oh,
tile.
it is? Okay, cool.
Spanish-esque tile.
I was
Yes.
like, how did I miss that? I'm afraid to change this. Sorry.
Okay, so we're not talking about the whole patio, we're just talking about the areas of
We'll
black
just follow the condition, the recommended
Yes,
condition.
the condition that's
Okay.
there. Yeah, and do we,
The garage door, we don't know if you guys are going to vote to replace that or not. If you do, we'll send it to the garage door recycling facility.
Oh, no, the garage door must be replaced. I'm sorry.
as bad as that may be, maybe someone on eBay can take it that. It does seem to be in good condition, but yes, that should, as far as I'm concerned, that should be replaced.
And then I would suggest, based on our conversation,
Adding-
a condition to remove assuming the fence is outside the period of significance, removing the fence and the hedges.
Would you like to make a motion? You're kind of on a roll there.
I was trying to think if I had another question.
Oh, the texture of the plasterboard from the back. I mean, we've said that the house isn't visible from the back, really, but I didn't really drive down any of those lower streets and look up. I don't know if it's visible much from down below and if that really matters, but there is that major difference in the stucco texture, which,
We jokingly said that differentiated the older and the
I
newer.
mean, that's what I was thinking. I actually had that conversation with someone today about this specific thing. You know, we have this weird thing that we have to juggle, the having the resource be very clear versus any modifications being obvious so that you can differentiate the two. But then sometimes when we're trying to, you know, on a design review case, trying to have everything feel like it's cohesive and matches, it becomes difficult then to see where one ends and the other begins. So it's kind of always a conundrum for us. I get where you're coming from, Jay. Yes, it does definitely differentiate between the two. So.
I was kind of joking, but
Well, but it does. It certainly
Yes, it
does.
does, sure.
So it hasn't come up. I think we probably can just let that one lie, right? We're not going to go down that road?
No, I have a question on a different comment.
Okay. Go for
If
it.
that's okay. I was struck by Commissioner Yurka's comment on the patio and structural integrity of the whole facade on the back. And one of my first meetings was a very contentious meeting where a man had filled in the back patio of his house. And we all voted that one down. And here the man has added a patio which destroys the structural integrity of the original house. And I know we talk about the street, but for the Mills Act, we're talking about the entire house. And I think the historical significance to Glendale is great for the registry. But I think that patio, I know we're talking about all these other things, but I think the patio does enough for me to take it off the Mills Act application because of the serious consideration of what it's done to the facade of the house. And you look at the picture, and that struck me when you said that. Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that it's just completely. Casey, will you go to the view of the back of the house again for me?
Really?
Yes, click away.
Sorry.
No, the other way.
I did it. I was like, I want to go right, so I'm going to go left, and it was right.
So your concern is that the addition of the two-story loggia patio situation, in your mind, is potentially disqualifying from a Mills Act standpoint. in terms of
From a consistency and
from an integrity
precedent,
standpoint.
Yeah, consistency and integrity and precedent and what we've done in the council before and what we did. We're all,
Consistency-wise, we had a house in Ross Moyne, beautiful architectural specimen, had a crazy kind of back wood stair that I think this is before everyone except Mike.
No, I was here for
You were
this
on?
one. Yeah. And the garage lean-to kind of thing it had.
No.
Yeah, the front had a big modification also.
Not
Tudor,
the one
right?
not the one I'm thinking of.
Oh,
This one's
Okay, go
pretty,
ahead.
This one's pretty pure. Anyways, it had this kind of crazy jerry-rigged kind of wood kind of balcony / stairway so you could get to the backyard on the downhill slope from the upper floor.
Yes.
And that ended up with a split commission vote because at least one commissioner felt that really took away from the architectural character. I think here, because we're looking at integrity differently than we would for a purely architectural designation or nomination, you do have more flexibility, which doesn't mean that Commissioner Doom won't decide to vote against this because of that, and he can make the case to persuade you guys, so.
And just to tear off what Jay's saying, I go back to what I said a little bit earlier about how in the National Register, it's called Criterion B for significant persons and how that integrity works. And again, the historical contemporary needs to be able to recognize it. And we could assume that if a historical contemporary was there, they would probably not just be looking at one elevation of the house. They would be looking at the house in total. And so my guess, I mean, I'm not Burnett at all, but my guess is that he would still recognize this as his house with a very bizarre addition on the back of it, but because of the setting, because of design features on the front of the house, obviously it hasn't been relocated. There's aspects of original workmanship that are still there. Feeling an association, taking the house as a whole, it's still there. This is an unfortunate rear addition, but because we're not dealing with design significance to begin with, and we look at integrity for the whole property, not just, we don't split it up into elevations, I think it should still be acceptable in this case, as opposed to if we were dealing with a design issue.
so persuade me on design significance.
Okay, so for design significance, you have to have many more character defining features that are there. So let's say we were calling out a house as a significant example of a Victorian house, a free classic or whatever Victorian house. Does it have that gingerbread presumably on all four sides? Does it have its original windows? Does it have its turret? Typically, if we call out design significance for a house, we're not just dealing with the front facade or even the front and the sides. It's that the significance of that design in total. So we're not calling this out as a significant example of its design. If we were, it wouldn't be a landmark, in part because of this sort of egregious sort of Enya era addition on the back, from whatever that was. So there's what the National Register Bulletin calls thresholds of integrity. So if you have a property that's eligible for an event or a broad pattern or a person, that integrity is much lower than design, which is treated much more almost like an art piece or artfully for its significance as almost something akin to a work of art or moving in that direction.
For
Okay.
Nick's
Oh, go ahead.
reference, there are 7 aspects of integrity that the Park Service uses, whether it's for National Register or we use them locally now. Materials, design, and workmanship are what Daniel's talking about, the qualities that create the architectural specimen. This house retains parts of those, but certainly not all. It
Yeah.
fully retains its location, it fully retains its setting, it largely retains its association, which is probably the biggest one that we have, because this is Burnett's house, and as Daniel said, he would, I don't say, what were you saying, material, historical contemporary?
Yeah.
I like
Historical,
to
it's Bulletin 15, and I think it's in page 47 or 48 in the 40s.
I think it's 49.
Since the Park Service is so deeply wonky, when I'm speaking to people, I like to say, if W.R. Burnett rose from the dead and came back to his house.
Wanted to go
This is far
home.
more graceful.
But I think it
it's
is a
not as colorful in
bulletin. I think
Burnett, it's very colorful.
There's a bulletin in the National Register, and I don't know how germane. I mean, there's a lot of questions about, we're dealing with a local ordinance here. What does the National Register matter? But a lot of cities tend to use, unless you have thresholds of integrity encoded in your ordinance, they'll defer to the federal. They'll defer to the federal guidance, which is why I'm bringing it up. And just as a lot of cities use the Secretary of the Interior standards, which is federal too, and they don't make up their own. So association, the thinking is that they're for historic association, because the house isn't important as an example of design, there doesn't need to be as much of it there, or it doesn't need to be as special in its design or so distinctive in its design. That's not why the house there's different criteria for why a property can be important, and it's not always the artfulness of its design.
I mean, I think Casey opened with that. She
Yeah.
kind of said we're not here for the architectural significance of the property.
And I also do think that
That's not lovely.
if the alteration
It is a nice house.
were placed in the front, and it was this, like a discordant thing that was what you saw from the house
think
at
there'd
the
be
most
some real
important
trouble.
elevation, then I think, that would be much harder, I think, to look past, even though Daniel's completely right about, about the relationship between integrity based on association and integrity based on architectural character. So the fact that it's behind is what enabled me to really move past it.
I understand that, and it is a beautiful house. Don't get me wrong. My wife would love to live there compared to our house. And I'm just thinking of what I experienced on this council and what we have turned down in the past. And the word significant, you can drive a truck through. It's such a vague term to interpret. I would accept Daniel's logic if we were talking about an architect who designed this house and some significance, but that had special meaning in history. But it's an author.
Okay.
Who is relative to
So-
Glendale, who had nothing to do with the design of the house, and the changes were made after he lived there, which destroyed the integrity of the house of the time period in which he did live there.
So to go back to what you just said about an architect, normally if there's a significant architect, that is going to fall under what criterion C for design significance too. Architects do not go under the second criteria. So the second criterion C is for, is a house a significant example of a design, and does it embody, is it a significant or distinctive expression associated with a master architect? So the architect would fall under the design criterion also.
Far more strict.
We're going to have to change that language. So.
But just to underscore what Daniel's saying is the physical integrity, the workmanship, materials, and design, that would be much more important to have intact if it were significant for the architect who built it. If you think about the example that we had not that long ago, I don't remember where the house was. It was the Craftsman that had an addition by Arthur Heinemann. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, Cedar Hill, 1527 Cedar Hill.
That was the property that we ended up removing from the register. And in part, it was because, notable architect, but didn't really express the significance associated with the original work. And there were lots of material alterations to the property. So I just throwing that out there.
All right. Okay, we may just have to live with disagreeing.
That's fine.
At this stage. Okay, so we were kind of in the process of maybe potentially hearing a motion.
Oh, could I just add one thing? And this is, sorry, this is very
Yes,
quick. And I'm
please.
sure it's something that the owner applicant has thought of, but we do, one thing we do not govern and we do not make recommendations about is paint color, but I was just thinking that if the black trim, because you mentioned repainting the house, if that went away, I think that would be advantageous. Okay, so I make, oh,
No pressure, you don't have to if anybody else would like to. You just kind of already
She's on a
started.
roll.
so are these two separate motions?
Usually one with an and, right?
Motion to recommend designation to city council with conditions which you
Criteria
can
too.
outline. And the Mills Act.
Well, the
Right.
reason I'm asking is because I'm
Do you
not
wanna
quite
do it separately?
Well, I'm just not quite sure how Nick feels, because I didn't know whether he felt it wasn't eligible and wasn't eligible for the Mills Act, or if he thought it was eligible for the Register but had concerns
He
about
has
the Mills
one.
Act.
No, I'd say that we just do it like normal.
All right, I move that, oh, thank you, that we recommend to the city council that the property at 926 Hillcroft Road be listed in the Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and that the property be called the W.R. Burnett House. And I'm going to interrupt my motion to say I love that it's not the William, that it really is the W.R., because that's how he's known. And that we recommend that a Mills Act contract, that the city enter into a Mills Act contract with the property owner for property tax savings with the conditions noted above, including
Well, she doesn't have to read them all.
including the addition of the condition relating to the fence and the hedges.
And the removal of the fence and the hedge we'll put in.
Great. Do I have a second, anyone?
Second.
That was ugly.
Thank you, Daniel. Got a second from Daniel. Roll call, please.
Okay, should I make this dramatic?
Please.
Because-
As dramatic as possible.
All right, so we will start with Commissioner Yurka,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Paul.
Yes.
I have to go to Commissioner Doom now.
No.
Oh, very dramatic. And Commissioner Carnati.
Yes.
A rare split vote, but that shows that our democracy is working.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thank you for coming, Neil.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on and past.
Yeah. You guys too. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you guys
just
are
have a
really
little bit
great
more
for hanging out.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You
Oh,
have
good.
your civic duty
Oh, then
obligations
stay,
fulfilled.
stay.
No one's kicking you out. You're welcome to stay.
Bye, guys. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, just so Joanna, we'll have to, Joanna, the chair will have to open the hearing for that. We don't normally have speakers during updates.
Oh, okay.
But if the chair is open to it, we can choose to do it or not, I'm sure,
Yeah.
We have
just so you know.
callers? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Oops, were there any
I
callers?
always forget, yeah.
Okay, moving on and past, item 7B, review of proposed second-story addition at 1544 Ard Even. We are moving that to a date certain, August 17, 2023. So now we will move on to item number 8.
We have three
Can I just skip ahead to
updates.
C, or do you want to go do ABC? Okay, real quick then.
I'm sorry, what?
I was going to just skip ahead straight to C since we have a speaker, and then we could do A and B when we're
Okay,
done.
and just so you know, because this is an update, we don't have to open this to the public hearing. I don't see why we wouldn't, but it's the chair's discretion, so.
I'd like to skip to 8C.
Okay.
Update on Rockhaven roof repair and stabilization project. Casey?
This will be Jay.
Jay?
And this is just to show you some pictures. The city received the $8 million grant from Anthony Portantino's office. The work has begun, and I believe is completed. The Pines Cottage has new roof tile on it. We couldn't reuse the old tile, which was already a mix of different vintages of tile. There was some, it was very cool. We found tile with a stamp on it, as they used to do for bricks and tiles, SM and Co. What is that? It's the Santa Monica Brick Company, Santa Monica Brick Co. That's what it was, SM Brick Co. And they went out of business in like 1923. I think this was built in 1921. Don't quote me. I didn't put this together. But anyways, that company went out of business not long after this was built, which doesn't mean some of their tiles weren't hanging out for some years after that. You never know. But there was a mix of tiles. They had this black mastic on it, tested for asbestos, yes. So these are new tiles. We worked very hard to find tiles that were very, very close dimensionally, color-wise. New tiles are always going to look different. They look kind of new, and they haven't worn yet. They haven't gotten the
They'll age
patina
nicely.
of age.
Like all.
But, so the Pines Cottage, which is going to be the site of the museum that is part of the Portantino grant, was re-roofed. The city made the decision to not begin the work on the other buildings in terms of re-roofing. There's a multi-year history of the city trying to cover these buildings with tarps that have consistently failed, torn apart by the wind, shredded or degraded in the UV light of the sun. The tarps that are on now are a very heavy-duty material that's supposedly more UV resistant. They're attached much more firmly. They wrap the eaves, are attached back into the walls so that the wind isn't going to start lifting them up. This is what we call in preservation stabilization. It is a way to treat historic buildings, whether we, everyone has different views on how this should have happened, but what it should do is prevent more water from leaking in the buildings while the city works toward resolving whatever's going to happen with this site. So we just wanted to show you these pictures, let you know that the work, and I believe Joanna may tell us otherwise, but I believe that all of the tarping is done as well as the roofing on the Pines Cottage.
Thank you. Question away.
Question away. Is there any update on the condition of the interiors relating to mold?
No, but what this will do is prevent additional mold growth. I know mold has a life of its own. I assume when the buildings find their new use, they are going to be fully gutted or largely gutted. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But I haven't heard what the city's doing on mold at this point.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing.
Nope, just an update, but you're choosing to.
Yes, I'm opening the public hearing. Joanna?
I'm making a point of this because we're not voting on anything here.
Oh.
So you're just taking
We're
commentary.
so excited to hear somebody with some firsthand information about this update. Joanna, please come forward, if you don't mind stating your name for us.
I am Joanna Linkhorst, president of the Friends of Rock Haven.
Welcome.
I thank you so very much for letting me speak. It came to my attention that perhaps Rock Haven is not necessarily, and it got your attention, and I was really pleased to hear that there is an update that's going on about the roofs tonight. 15 years ago, when the city purchased the property, there is online a report of the sorts of things that would need to be done to help protect and restore the property. And I can see that none of those things have been done in that time. This is the biggest step toward any of that, and it's really not very much of a step for those of us who are hoping to preserve as much of this property as possible. And there is one issue. There are still some tarps unused on the driveway, and one building that is not tarped that is on the historic registry. So I have come to ask you guys to please consider advocating on behalf of the city, paying attention to its own rules toward historic preservation and perhaps moving forward in a way that is better protective and better preservation of a property that they own.
Sounds
Thank you
good.
very much.
Hold on, there might be a question.
sorry.
If
Oh,
you're probably
lovely.
gonna
Normally
ask,
I'm supposed to sit down. That's great.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about the tarps that are in the driveway. Do you know how long they've been there?
They were delivered along with all of the other tarps. The building specifically is the nurse's cottage, which seems to be slightly outside of the fencing, but it's because it's still a part of the property. It was built in 1928, and it was not housing for the residents. It was housing for the cook or any nurses that wanted to live on the property.
But it's part of the National Register Historic District.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
And, I mean, is it your assumption that the tarps were meant for that?
I have no idea. I'm uncertain why there are tarps that are
Not being
still
used?
there, yeah. And all of the buildings, other than the administration building, which is not part of the historic designation, is not done, so it does not need to be done. And it's one of the few good roofs anyway, but that this one has not yet been done.
Okay. Did you have a quick question?
Yes, is the nurse's cottage suffering water damage?
We do not know. We have not been inside the nurse's cottage. It is off limits to us.
Okay.
15 years ago, as part of the review of a company that the city hired, it was not considered damaged enough that it could not be preserved. They listed ways that it could be preserved. However, there was someone on staff at the time that said, man, this is rotten, we got to close this, we got to demolish it, we got to get rid of it. There was a period.
That was the building official.
Oh, thank you. He was also pretty scared about several other buildings too. He couldn't believe that anybody was living in the building that somebody's living in now. There was a company that was, that was coming in to see if they could do something with businesses in each of the buildings, and that building was included in their plans. They were figuring that it was able to be rehabilitated enough to be able to have a business put in it. So it does not seem to need to be condemned. One issue it does have is it's pretty easy for people to break into it, so the windows are boarded up, sadly. But that is really the only issue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your update.
Appreciate that.
I'm going to close the public hearing. Jay, you had a comment?
No,
Oh, okay. All right.
unless you have questions.
Kathy?
Can we ask that staff look into making sure that if the nurse's cottage requires tarping, that happens?
The nurse's cottage, before Joanna's involvement in the site, was red tagged, although I've never seen that red tag itself. But in all of the city's early estimates, the nurse's cottage has always been called out on all diagrams as not to remain as part of the site, including when we were looking at entertaining different features that would use the kind of northwest quadrant, the northwest section of the site. If it's in the National Register or designation, that's fine. It's in there. So I'm not sure. We probably would have to have the building official look at it again to see if the conditions that were there 15 years ago have gotten worse, or they agree that it was as bad as they thought at that time. So.
I'm just a little confused. So the nurse's cottage, do we know that the nurse's cottage is part of the National Register district? Is
We're
it?
taking Joanna's word for it as well, I don't know if you wrote it. But,
Is it a contributing resource? Do we know if it's a contributing resource? Okay. So, but yet, according to what you're saying, Jay, there's past documentation from the city that they were going to demolish it anyway.
Yeah, this isn't a huge deal. It's either safe or it's unsafe. If it's unsafe, it doesn't matter whether it's in the National Register. It could be torn down if it's a threat to human life and safety.
Well, I mean,
if it isn't, which it probably isn't, it probably could be rehabbed. We haven't also analyzed it in terms of how intact it is, because we literally haven't seen much of it. It's always been the kind of stepchild over in the corner.
But just because it's, I mean, yes, I understand that health and safety trump everything, but, you know, I mean, I was at a folk art environment for 15 years where none of it met the building code, and Bottle Village, and we're not going to demolish that because it
The city
didn't meet.
bought Rockhaven to preserve Rockhaven, to protect Rockhaven. The nurse's cottage was seen as the one building besides the administration building, and there's a little tool shed building that were kind of seen as not as significant as the others, plus the fact that the building official at the time made some sort of judgment. People said red tag. Like I said, I've never seen that red tag. There isn't an actual tag that you see. We'd have to go back and figure it out. We're not going to be able to resolve that right now. This isn't an agendized item, but given everyone's curiosity about this, we could certainly talk to the Public Works Department and see if those tarps in the driveway are intended for the nurse's cottage, or maybe they just bought more than they needed and it's just sitting there waiting to be disposed of. I don't know. But that's what I recommend we could do without opening this up as a kind of a bigger issue.
I mean, that sounds like a nice idea.
I'm not opposed to tarping the nurse's cottage if we think it could be reused, but it has for 15 years now been not seen as a significant part of the site.
Is there
Notwithstanding the National Register nomination, which the city wasn't involved with, so we didn't have an opportunity to weigh in on that aspect of it.
The SHPO approved that.
Of course.
I believe SHPO, if I'm remembering correctly, Friends of Rockhaven nominated it only to the California Register, And either SHPO or the commission said, no, you need to nominate this to the National Register. If
Which is kind of their guidance on everything these days, because
Yeah, that's kind of their new situation too. They don't really, I got a Futuro house listed on the California Register last year. I don't know how the heck I did it. Because now everything, I'm working on a few National Register nominations, and they're talking like California Register no longer exists as a landmark.
well, it's because national, unless it's so hard to discriminate what is national eligible versus
Yeah.
state eligible. That's always been a fine line to parse. Then now they're just deferring to National Register because automatically all National Register properties that are voted on by or approved by the keeper in Washington, D.C., keeper of the National Register, they automatically go on the California Register. So why not shoot for the moon and go for that?
I just wanted to thank you for coming and speaking to us, and to say, and this is to speak of the city as a general abstraction, but I understand that the city purchased the property to preserve it, but that track record is so poor, and I'm very sorry that Glendale and its residents and Rockhaven find themselves in the situation that it's in. So I hope this is the beginning of moving forward with the treatment that property has deserved. I remember when the Historic Preservation Ordinance was changed to include a prohibition against demolition by neglect. And one of the things I thought about when that was adopted was Rockhaven, because it seems to me it really has been demolition by neglect. And so I'm glad that tarps are going up, and that the money is in Glendale's hot little hands, and I hope that they're on the brink of doing good things with it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, tear off that too. I think it's great that, there is a new roof and these tarps look sturdy. So clearly, I think there are some steps in the right direction, and that's encouraging. And I think that needs to be acknowledged, that even if it's something small, it looks like something positive has happened recently.
So Jay, would it be inappropriate, I guess, from what I'm hearing, the city has been granted $8 million toward whatever at Rockhaven. When it's appropriate, can we get an update on what's going to be happening specifically with that? Or is that already?
I don't think anyone knows at this point what's going to happen. I think there's still private-public partnership ideas. There's,
I see.
I don't know.
It's not specifically to go directly into the thing right now to rehab it.
Yeah, I'm not directly in the loop, which I've sold to people, and it's an honest statement. I'm not directly in the loop of what people are thinking about Rockhaven right now. But in the short term, the decision was made to move the Pines Cottage forward so that could be rehabilitated as a museum site. And that's where things stand as far as I know.
Perhaps we can trust you to send us someone to chat with us when you think there's an interesting update for us.
This will come to you once, as it has in the past. If the city's moving forward, if we're putting out an RFP, if we're entertaining bids, or the city council is choosing a bidder, we're certainly going to keep you updated on all of that. So,
great. Thank you. Thank you again for coming. Item 8A, update on zoning code amendment regarding historic district designation process streamlining.
So we brought this to the Planning Commission last week. Was it last week? Yes. And basically, we're making the recommendations for code language based on when we brought this to HPC and to City Council. HPC was pretty pleased with the proposal. Council still has a couple of open questions that they'll hash out when they get this. They are now the final step in terms of the approval or modification of the proposed ordinance. That will probably happen August, September in terms of getting to council. As soon as they approve it, it takes 30 days for ordinance changes to come into effect. But during that period, Casey and I will be moving forward with the Selva Vista Verdugo nomination. We're going to move that forward a little faster. We're kind of splitting up our efforts between the two nominations, but the Verdugo Woodlands neighborhood designation has been sitting with us longer, certainly, than the Cleveland Knolls. We used to sometimes think, it's a bit more efficient to bring these things at the same pace, but these districts are so different that that's not going to be fair to anyone on either side. So we'll be, giving you updates as we move forward with that. But right now, the issue before council, the main issue, I think we've addressed some of the translation issues, how we're going to share information with members of the community in a way that's transparent and open. There seemed to be concern that maybe the proponents walking the neighborhood looking for petition signatures might not have been giving all the information they could. So we're going to have very specific handouts that they have that direct people to the website. We'll have a page on the website devoted to this. So that part I think we've worked out, hopefully to council's satisfaction. There's still an open issue about the final petition, or perhaps the second petition. The first petition has become now we're not going to have an initial petition unless there are bigger issues in terms of HPC or council thinking there may be issues of support in the neighborhood. When we have what we used to call the second petition, but the big one asking council to designate the district, the current code asks that the owners of over 50% of the properties sign. The Planning Commission supported that 3-1. They didn't take a split vote. They all supported the language change, but we told them we would be acknowledging in the City Council report that there was one kind of slight dissent from one of the members who was just interested in exploring a different number, a higher number. And then on council, that was a discussion. So when we bring it to them, that's going to be an open number. Staff will recommend 50%, HPC recommended 50%, Planning Commission recommended 50 plus, 50 plus for all of these. So we'll just see where that goes.
Wow.
And that's my update.
Thank you. Last item, 8B, update on East-West and North Glendale surveys.
And I am still preparing the RFP for the surveys. I was hoping to be finished tonight so I could just say, I'm done. And then as soon as this meeting was over, I could go home. But no, when this meeting is over, I'm going to go back upstairs and keep working on it. But the idea is that we're getting bidders to propose for the East-West Glendale historic context, and then also a historic resource survey. So surveys always need to be associated or attached to a context. And you've been through this before, you may not remember, but the idea of the context is it establishes the framework for how do we identify what might be eligible for designation and what isn't eligible. And it does that by looking at the historical narrative of this area of Glendale. It identifies various contexts and themes. Context could include things like early residential development, pre-war suburbanization, post-war suburbanization, whatever it is. It will include things like institutions, commercial thoroughfares, and properties. It's up to the consultant team to kind of flesh out what those are going to be. They'll be working with staff. There will be public meetings associated with this, including the Historical Society. We'll be putting up a web page on the city website asking people to say, hey, we're doing this survey, what do you know? Similar to what Los Angeles did. So we're going to try to get the word out as much as we can. We'll have a few public meetings with the consultant and staff, and commissioners are welcome to join. The 2 historical societies will be welcome to join. The Friends of Rockhaven will be welcome to join. Everyone can come to this party. So that's what the survey will be for East and West Glendale, the context. Then the survey is a separate document that focuses on identifying the neighborhood character features, the styles of architecture that are found in the area, and then does the property by property survey, which is the big chunk of time, because East-West Glendale has 22,000 plus parcels. And then we're also going to be doing the same thing for North Glendale. The dividing line is basically North Glendale starts at Spar Heights and Montecito Park. And the northern end of the east-west part of Glendale includes Oakmont, the Oakmont Country Club, and the Verdugo Woodlands. So that's kind of the split that we've got. And the issue with North Glendale is we're asking for a separate bid because there's some concern that the number, the dollar figure that comes in may force the city to look at phasing these projects. But it's clear that the intent after this is we will have a South Glendale survey, the middle of Glendale surveyed, and ultimately North Glendale surveyed. My hope is we do both of those at the same time, and that's a big project, so we'll get some bids that probably bring in consultant teams ganging up, which often happens for large surveys. And so for North Glendale, it's going to be the same. We have fewer properties, about 7,700 properties in North Glendale. These are properties with development on them. There are many, many more parcels in the city, but we don't look at those.
For East-West, do you already have a consultant selected?
No, we're putting out the RFP.
Okay.
So if you're worried about recusing,
No, I'm not kidding. No. I was just curious to know who was selected, but I'm sorry I missed the part about the RFP.
yeah, we have a standard list of consultants from Ventura down to San Diego who we send these out to.
Okay, thanks.
We have to check the website to find out the dates of these meetings. Do you have a month in mind?
Nothing. This is just the RFP. We're not establishing,
Preliminary,
we
so-
have a vague timeline so the bidders know roughly just what they need to do in terms of submitting their bids and how the bids are going to be reviewed. Everything else is worked out with the consultant themselves, and we don't know until we know who's going to get the bid, what their staffing levels are like, what their workload is like. So it always varies consultant to consultant.
Okay,
That's all I've got.
thank you. Well, with that, we are adjourned. It is 7:08.
Lovely.
2 hours, look at that. Thanks, everybody. See you next month.